Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about simplicity. Real estate investors are famous for saying that you can buy a property based on both price and terms. I'll let you set the price as long as I get to set the terms. The trivial example is, I'll pay you $10 million for that old 1950s single-family home, but I'll make daily installments of 10 cents a day until the $10 million is fully paid off. As long as you set the payment terms, you can agree to virtually any price. I learned a powerful lesson in the past month. It's a lesson that I already knew, or at least I thought I did, and sometimes I find myself learning the same lesson more than once. So here's the story. I've always known that a confused mind doesn't make a decision. The author and marketing expert Donald Miller is famous for his saying, "When you confuse, you lose. Noise is the enemy, and a clear message is the best way to grow your business." I've known this for a long time. A confused mind simply will not make a decision. My partners and I have a property under contract. We're looking to assemble several of the neighboring parcels in order to build a high-rise project. This requires negotiating the purchase of these properties with each of the neighboring landowners. As with any negotiation, the seller wants to maximize the price, and as a buyer, I don't want to pay too much. The value of the land to me is largely dependent on what the city will ultimately allow to be built on that site. The value is going to be influenced by the height restriction and by the setbacks from the property line. It'll be influenced by any restrictions imposed by the zoning code. Will the city allow 6 stories, 9 stories, maybe 14? The higher the density, the greater the value of the land. Can I build right to the property line, or will there be a required setback? So I thought I would be clever and offer the landowners a purchase price that was indexed to the density that was ultimately achieved. We would agree with the seller on a minimum price, and if the city granted, say, greater height above the minimum, then the seller would get more money. I was pretty proud of the sophistication of this idea. It aligned the goals of both the buyer and the seller towards the common goal of getting the highest possible density approved. It transferred the risk of paying too much a little bit onto the seller, and ultimately both parties would get a win-win solution. They'd get what they wanted. Now, before submitting the offer to each of the sellers, I asked them if they were in agreement with this approach. They would receive a base amount in the offer and a variable upside. In every single case, they said the idea worked for them. Now, in the case of the first property, the seller indicated that he didn't really want to sell. They appreciated the gesture to offer more money in the future, but that once they had a sale price that they were satisfied with, they didn't actually need more than that. They would rather keep the transaction simple. In the case of the second property, the owner, who's also a developer, was appreciative of the concept to provide greater value. They too indicated the most important part would be the base price and not the variable component that represented considerable upside value for both us and them. And while the seller of the property number 2 definitely thinks like a developer, because they are a developer, they too said that they would base their decision on the base price. Upside was just a bonus that they would not really factor into the decision making. The third property owner was also appreciative of the offer at first. In the end, when it came to finalize the negotiation, he came back and indicated that a simple transaction for a fixed price would be preferable. If we get greater height allowance or setback allowance, then he'd be happy for us. Here too, he wanted a lump sum amount. We looked at structures that would possibly provide some benefit of some tax deferral, and here too, they decided that they would just elect to pay the tax and keep it simple. So here I was, thinking we'd come up with a clever solution to negotiating the purchase price for 3 properties, and in each and every case, the idea didn't really connect with the seller. Only one of them truly got it, and even then, didn't really value it. In almost every case, we were negotiating with one representative from each property, but in truth, there were multiple stakeholders behind the scenes that we didn't have a chance to talk with directly. So, what was the lesson? Keep it simple and easy to understand. And number 2, don't assume that all the stakeholders will connect with your clever idea if they're not part of the conversation directly. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.